Okay, let's just jump right into this. If you spent any time at all looking at true crime discussions lately, you've definitely seen the intense and honestly highly emotional debate surrounding the Lindsay Clancy case. It is a story that has absolutely taken the internet by storm. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're doing something really important. We're going to use the detailed source material from the Law and Crime Network's coverage to separate the actual verified courtroom proceedings from all those viral internet conspiracies. We really need to unpack what's actually happening inside the courtroom and contrast that with the wild theories exploding in the court of public opinion. So, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the anatomy of a tragedy, move into the prosecution's narrative, and then explore the defense's argument. After that, we'll dive into the internet rumors and conspiracies, and finally, look at the ultimate question. Part 1. Anatomy of a tragedy. The baseline facts. Right off the bat, the crucial thing to understand here is that this is not a whodunit. Lindsay Clancy fully admits to the physical act of killing her 3 young children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Kellen, by strangling them with exercise bands on January 24, 2023. Following that, she attempted to take her own life by slitting her wrists and jumping from a second-story window. Because those physical facts are not in dispute, this trial is entirely a battle over her state of mind. Her defense maintains she was suffering from postpartum psychosis and was in the midst of a total mental break, meaning she completely lacked criminal responsibility. And, if you want to grasp just how incredibly tense this courtroom is, there was a moment that perfectly illustrates it. During the really graphic autopsy testimony for 8-month-old Kellen, Lindsay was sobbing. Sobbing to the point where she ultimately had to be taken out of the courtroom. And in that exact moment, her defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, alleged that the prosecution was actually caught on a hot mic saying, "Shut her up," as she cried. Now, the district attorney's office came out later after reviewing the tape and reported that someone actually said, "Shut it off," talking about a camera, and that it wasn't even the prosecutor speaking. But wow, this explosive moment, which even made the judge issue a strict zero-tolerance warning for disruptive comments, it just sets the exact tone for how fiercely contested this trial really is. Part 2. The prosecution's narrative. Calculated actions. So, the Commonwealth argues that Lindsay was a highly manipulative, meticulous woman. They are basically pointing to extreme helicopter parenting as hard evidence of a calculated mind. They brought up how she left these intense, overbearing instructions for her nanny in a kitchen notebook, how she tracked her baby's sleep to the exact minute, and, get this, even demanded that food prep like sweet potatoes and celery be cut into precise 1-inch squares. The prosecution's narrative is essentially that she needed to control absolutely everything, and when her perfect life felt out of control, she executed a terrible, meticulously planned escape. They also argue she was entirely lucid right after her suicide attempt. After she was airlifted to a Boston hospital, she was intubated, right? Unable to speak. But as soon as she could use a whiteboard, her very first questions weren't chaotic or confused at all. She literally wrote, "Do I have an attorney?" And shortly after that, she asked a social worker to help legally change her healthcare proxy from her husband to her parents. The prosecution uses these incredibly methodical, self-preserving steps to argue, look, a person experiencing a total psychotic break just wouldn't have the presence of mind to immediately secure legal counsel and restructure medical proxies. Part 3. The defense's argument, medical system failure. Okay, so switching gears, the defense's entire argument hinges on postpartum psychosis, and context is absolutely key here. While postpartum depression is pretty common, it affects about 1 in 4 women, postpartum psychosis is a highly rare psychiatric emergency. We're talking 1 in 2,000 women. The defense argues Lindsay was deep in the throes of this severe condition, and it completely fractured her reality. And through expert cross-examination, they established that someone can be in a state of psychosis and still appear to communicate normally with friends or family, which, of course, effectively counters the prosecution's claims about her seemingly lucid whiteboard moments. But you really have to look at the sheer volume of psychiatric intervention here, because it is staggering. Take a look at this dizzying cocktail of heavy medications, antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds, mood stabilizers, sleep aids, antipsychotics. All of these were prescribed to Lindsay in just a 4-month window leading up to the tragedy. The defense is painting this very stark picture of medical malpractice, essentially arguing that doctors were just throwing an awful lot of drugs at a worsening problem. And the result? A severely overmedicated woman whose brain was effectively broken by the very medical system that was supposed to help her. Her own journal entries, which were read aloud in court, devastatingly support this idea of a shattered mind. She documented this horrible insomnia, sometimes going 48 hours straight without a wink of sleep. She wrote about experiencing severe anxiety, a complete loss of appetite, and this terrifying inability to connect with her infant. She literally wrote the words, "I want to die," and documented her intense fear of her own relationship, along with crippling brain fog. The defense uses her own tragic words to prove she was practically screaming for help and was fully aware that her mental state was deteriorating rapidly.
Now, here is where we see a massive contradiction. And the wild part is, it comes from the prosecution's own witness. So the prosecution called the family nanny to the stand, clearly hoping she'd testify about those 1-inch celery squares to prove Lindsay was this overbearing control freak. But instead, when the defense cross-examined the nanny and asked if she found Lindsay controlling, the nanny flat out said, not at all. And when asked about her interactions with the kids, the nanny dropped a total bombshell, stating under oath she was a wonderful mom. According to reporters in the room, jurors literally grabbed their pens and started taking notes the second she said that. It heavily undercut the prosecution's whole narrative of a cold, calculating killer.
Part 4, Internet Rumors and Conspiracies, the Court of Public Opinion. But what happens when we step outside the courtroom? As the public digests the overwhelming tragedy of 3 murdered children, a massive wave of, misdirected anger and totally unsubstantiated conspiracy theories has zeroed in entirely on Lindsay's husband, Patrick Clancy. True crime commentators and TikTok sleuths are aggressively dissecting his every single move, asking if he was a negligent partner or, incredibly, if he was somehow actually involved. These internet sleuths have obsessively scrutinized Patrick's timeline, trying to find some kind of sinister intent in totally everyday actions. Like, they question why he went on a work trip to New York in November when his wife was struggling. They find it highly suspicious that in December, on the exact day he dropped Lindsay off at a mental health facility in Rhode Island, he took his son skiing. And they heavily question the timeline of January 24th, asking over and over, why on earth would he leave his severely depressed wife alone at home with the kids to go run a 30-minute errand for CVS medication and restaurant takeout? And let me tell you, this internet rabbit hole goes incredibly deep, culminating in what people are actually calling the shoe conspiracy. So, surveillance footage shows Patrick at CVS wearing what looks like a half-zip jacket and brown boots. Minutes later, arriving at the 3V restaurant for takeout, he appears to be wearing a full zip jacket and tennis shoes. Well, the internet absolutely exploded over this unverified discrepancy. People are wildly speculating that he changed clothes to hide something nefarious. I mean, more grounded observers point out the obvious. This is Massachusetts in January. He probably just changed out of his wet snow boots in the car. But online, this footage is literally being paraded around as proof of guilt. And the rumors just get even more personal from there. TikTok creators are out there fueling unsubstantiated rumors about a secret affair during that New York work trip. This seems heavily driven by recent reports that Patrick quickly remarried an NYC-based fertility doctor, who, of course, internet users claim strongly resembles Lindsay. On top of that, internet critics are just ruthlessly attacking Patrick's flat, emotionless demeanor on the witness stand. They completely ignore the very real possibility that he's severely traumatized and heavily compartmentalizing after living this nightmare for years. Instead, they use his flat tone as supposed proof that he never even cared for his family. Now, if you're wondering why the internet is acting this way, experts actually point to something they call the Karen Reed effect. Because of recent highly publicized, very controversial trials in that specific area, there is this massive, widespread public distrust in Massachusetts law enforcement right now. This pre-existing skepticism essentially causes the public to instinctively reject the official police investigation, which, by the way, fully cleared Patrick, and invent alternate suspects and wild conspiracies just to make sense of an unimaginable tragedy. Part 5. The Ultimate Question. So, with the internet firmly divided and the legal teams presenting completely opposite narratives from the exact same set of facts, we find ourselves at a massive crossroads. Will the jury buy the prosecution's narrative of a meticulous, hyper-controlling mother who plotted a terrible escape? Or will they believe the defense's harrowing tale of a loving mother whose mind was completely fractured by rare postpartum psychosis and a negligent medical system? How will a jury of her peers ultimately interpret the mind of Lindsay Clancy? That is the ultimate question this trial has to answer. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and keep your eyes on the courtroom as this complex case continues to unfold.